In late 1939, the Koko Hombu instructed Tachikawa to develop an advanced twin-engined multi-purpose trainer. Their intention was to provide a more realistic introduction to crews of new high-performance bombers, the speed and handling performance of which was now well beyond that of the biplane trainers then in use. Furthermore, the aircraft was to simultaneously train the entire bomber crew, including the bombardier, navigator, gunners, and radio operator, as well as the pilot. To achieve the required performance, the designer, Ryokichi Endo, chose a low-wing design with retractable undercarriage for his Y-39 project. The engines were 450 horsepower Hitachi HA-13 radials fitted with Hamilton-type variable pitch propellers with two blades. 510 horsepower was available for takeoff. The HA-13 was a 17.9-litre 9-cylinder engine that weighed 330 kilograms. The aircraft itself was 39 feet long, with a 58-foot 8-inch wingspan. It was of all-metal construction with fabric-covered control surfaces. Empty weight was about 6,500 pounds. Fully loaded, it was 8,500 pounds. It was therefore quite comparable to the 1934 Lockheed Electra, which was marginally smaller and lighter, and also powered by a pair of 9-cylinder radials, in that case 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp Juniors. The Wasp Junior weighed 310 kilos in this version, making it similar to the HA-13. Y-39 first flew in glider form to prove out the basic aerodynamics. Given the designation Ki-54, the first prototype flew with engines in the summer of 1940. It was broadly satisfactory, the exception being its slightly nose-heavy trim during landings. This was corrected, and the aircraft went into production in 1941 as the Army Type 1 Advanced Trainer Model A. Unsurprisingly, this was usually shortened to Ki-54A. Ki-54A was intended to prepare pilots for the famous G4M Betty. The Betty was 65.5 feet long with an 81-foot 8-inch wingspan. It weighed 14,800 pounds empty, and it could lift off at nearly 29,000 pounds. But in terms of performance, the two aircraft were actually reasonably comparable. The Betty topped out at 267 miles an hour versus 234 in the Ki-54. Cruising speed was 149 miles an hour in the Ki-54 and 196 in the Betty. Ki-54A was followed by the Type 1 Operations Trainer Model B, or Ki-54B, which added four 7.7mm machine gun positions to enable the training of the full crew. This version could also drop practice bombs. Some aircraft had a distinctive long glass canopy on the upper fuselage that allowed the instructor to move between the gun turrets. The decent performance, high reliability, and 600-mile range of the Ki-54, which was nicknamed Hickory by the Allies, led the Imperial Japanese Army to adapt it as a liaison and light transport aircraft able to seat up to 8 passengers. Although production data by version has been elusive, I believe that the resultant Ki-54C was the most common version. One, or sometimes two, were assigned to core command groups in most areas occupied by the Imperial Japanese Army. 1,368 Hickories were built, the majority in 1943 and 44, a small number of which were the Ki-54D anti-submarine patrol variant, carrying 10 60-kilogram depth charges. I've not seen any photos of the anti-submarine version, but it was apparently operational to at least some extent. In general, the Hickory was a successful, if unheralded, aircraft. At least one example provided transport for senior Japanese officers on their way to surrender. This aircraft from the 10th Independent Air Brigade of the Imperial Japanese Army carried the surrender delegation in Borneo on the 10th of September 1945. Its stripped fuselage is in storage at the Australian National Collection in Canberra. Some other examples that survived the war were pressed into service by other air arms. Half a dozen were used by the French in Indochina. One aircraft was obtained by the North Koreans when Japanese forces pulled out. It was used as a pilot, trainer, and transport in the 1940s and at the start of the invasion of South Korea. When UN forces counterattacked and rapidly rolled back the North Koreans, the aircraft was captured again and used by the US for a time before being scrapped. Aircraft also flew operationally in China until the early 1950s before they too were discarded. No complete examples remain today. An ignominious end for one of the best Japanese aircraft of the Second World War.